On the morning of April 7th, 2018, a woman was alive inside her Florida home, speaking gently to her little boy, answering the door, moving through an ordinary morning. Within minutes, she would be dead on the bedroom floor. And the man standing just feet from the center of it all would tell 911 the same thing again and again. It was an accident. The home sat on Felter Lane in Palm Coast, Florida. Quiet street. Clean yards. The kind of neighborhood where violence feels out of place. Inside that house lived 25-year-old Brandi Celenza, her husband Keith Johansen, and Brandi's 6-year-old son Ryland. Brandi and Keith had been married about a year. They had recently moved into the home. From the outside, it looked like a fresh start. New house. New marriage. New life. That morning began with the kind of small moments that disappear in most lives and become unforgettable in a murder case. A religious couple came to the door. Brandi answered. She was warm, friendly, and relaxed. They chatted for a moment on the doorstep. Nothing looked wrong. Nothing sounded wrong. After that, Ryland came out wanting breakfast. He was wrapped in a blanket. Sleepy. Comfortable. Safe in the way only children can be when they still believe the world around them is steady. Brandi spoke to him with affection. He clearly adored her. Their exchange was soft, ordinary, loving. It would become one of the last peaceful moments of her life. Not long after, the calm was gone. A 911 dispatcher answered the call. Keith Johansen was on the line. He said he had been in the shower. He said he heard gunshots and he thought his wife had accidentally shot herself. Even in a crisis, the wording mattered. Not someone shot my wife and I found her bleeding. Not confusion and panic so deep that words fell apart. He offered an explanation almost immediately. An accident. The dispatcher tried to move fast. Was Brandi breathing? Could she talk? Could he help her? Could he apply pressure to the wound? Keith said she was breathing. He called out to her. He said he could hear her. But when the dispatcher pushed him to render aid, he stalled. He said he was wet. He said he was sliding on the wood floors and he could not see the wound properly. He said he did not want another gun to go off. The dispatcher kept trying to guide him. He kept finding reasons not to touch her. On the surface, it sounded frantic. Underneath, something already felt wrong. Paramedics and deputies rushed toward the house. But time was already running out. When first responders arrived, Brandi was beyond saving. She was found in the master bedroom, between the bed and the nightstand, lying on her back. She had been shot twice in the chest and breast area. 2 gunshot wounds. 2 shots. That detail hit immediately. Because 1 accidental shot is one thing. 2 is something else. Outside the home, Keith repeated the story. He said he had been in the shower and he heard 2 loud sounds. He said at first he thought it was a balloon. Then he heard a second shot. Then he ran out and found Brandi on the floor with guns beside her. He said he called 911 immediately. He was emotional. He was agitated. He asked if she could be saved. He asked for someone to get Ryland. He looked like a husband living through the worst moment of his life. But the first cracks were already there. He said he had just stepped out of the shower. Yet he did not look like a man who had really been under running water. He was wearing jeans. He appeared splashed, not soaked. His body language did not settle the room. It sharpened it. Then came another detail. Ryland had been in his room, just steps away. Not outside. Not across the street. Inside the house. Close enough to hear what happened. Keith told deputies the boy had not seen anything. He said Ryland had been watching TV, drifting in and out of sleep. That was important. So was what came next. Because when a child is this close to a violent death, investigators know to listen carefully. Children often hear more than adults expect. And in this case, the child would later reveal one small detail that would destroy the shape of Keith's story. Before that happened, the scene itself had to speak. The bedroom was processed carefully. The body was photographed. The weapons were examined. The room was studied for movement, placement, angle, and timing. 2 guns were found near Brandi's feet. They were positioned in a way that did not feel random. Not tossed. Not naturally fallen. Too neat. Too controlled. It looked less like chaos and more like arrangement. Because an accident leaves a mess of movement. A struggle leaves disorder. A staged scene tries to imitate both and often fails. And then there were the cameras. The house had surveillance cameras. They were mounted around the property and inside the home. That changed everything. But video records what people forget to hide. Keith admitted there were cameras around the house. Then he minimized them. Then he claimed the system was not working properly. Then he said he could not remember the login details. The harder he tried to control what those cameras meant, the more important they became. Inside that house, a woman was dead. A husband was offering a ready-made explanation. A child had been only feet away. 2 shots had torn through the calm of an ordinary morning. And somewhere inside that home, hidden in plain sight, was the truth of what had really been happening before Brandi ever hit the floor. By the end of that first day, the scene no longer looked like an accident. It looked like the start of a much darker story. And the cameras were about to open the door. The first stage of an investigation is often about restraint. The instinct is to move, to accuse, to lock onto the person who seems most likely. But murder cases are not built on instinct. They are built on proof. So even as suspicion settled over the house on Felter Lane, Keith Johansen was still treated like a grieving spouse. He was questioned carefully and watched closely, given room to talk. And he talked. At first, he leaned into the image he wanted everyone else to see. A man blindsided by tragedy. A husband trying to make sense of something impossible. A victim of chance. He told deputies and detectives that the marriage had been good. More than good. He described Brandi as everything he wanted. He said their relationship was solid. He said they had arguments here and there, but nothing serious. Nothing violent. Nothing extreme. That was the version he wanted fixed in place from the start. Happy marriage. Fresh beginning. Sudden tragedy. But interrogations are not just about the answers. They are about what those answers avoid. Detectives began gently. They asked about the relationship. They asked about Brandi. They asked about stress, routine, and recent tension. Keith kept trying to flatten everything. Minor issues. Normal arguments. Nothing dangerous. Then the conversation moved toward fidelity. And the temperature changed. Keith admitted there had been an issue involving Brandi online. He described sexual behavior that had angered him. He tried to downplay it and sound casual. Tried to frame it as something he had more or less moved past. But the timing told a different story. This was not ancient history. This was recent. Fresh enough to still be burning. Suddenly, what had been presented as a peaceful home looked less stable. There had been jealousy, sexual resentment, humiliation, control. Not in the distant past. In the immediate lead-up to Brandi's death. That gave investigators motive to test. Not yet proof, but motive. And motive matters when a man stands in his front yard saying his wife accidentally shot herself twice. Keith held to the shower story. He said he was in the bathroom. He heard the shots. He came out and found Brandi on the floor. He insisted that was all. No argument. No confrontation. No scream. No violence between them that morning. Then detectives interviewed Ryland. He was 6 years old. Children in forensic interviews are not pushed the way adults are. They are guided carefully. Simple questions. Clear language. Space to speak in their own way. Ryland said his mother was in the bedroom. He said Keith was in the shower. He repeated the basic explanation he had already been given inside that house. His mother accidentally shot herself. No one else was with her. That phrase mattered. Because when children repeat a polished adult explanation, investigators notice. But then came the detail that cut through everything. Ryland said he heard his mother scream. Then he heard 2 gunshots. A scream. Then 2 shots. That single sequence changed the emotional architecture of the case. Because if Brandi screamed first, something happened before the gunfire. A reaction. A threat. A moment of fear. And if that moment existed, the accident story started collapsing under its own weight. When detectives confronted Keith with that, he did not bend. He did not reconsider. He did not say maybe he missed something in the chaos. He denied hearing any scream at all. Then he pushed back harder. Why would the boy say that? Children lie. He lies about things. Ask his real father. That answer landed badly. Not only because he was attacking the credibility of a 6-year-old on the day the boy's mother had died, but because it showed where his priorities already were. Not grief. Not horror. Not the truth. Control. He needed the child's words weakened because those words had become dangerous. Investigators kept pressing. Not with accusations. With reality. The scene did not fit what he was describing. The positions of the guns did not make sense. The physical layout did not support the kind of accidental discharge he was trying to sell. And still he held the line. This is what happened. This is the story. That word kept hanging in the room. Story. As though the event itself could be shaped into something by insistence alone. As though repetition could make the scene obey him. It did not help that his behavior around the house itself felt off. He wanted to know the process. He wanted to know what would happen next and when he could leave. He wanted to know about Ryland. He wanted to know about chaplains and next steps and logistics. Some of that was natural. Some of it was not. Because woven through everything was a current of self-focus. How this affected him. How this looked for him. What this meant for him. Even while Brandi's body was still inside the house, a chaplain spoke with him. Keith talked about faith. About how young Brandi was. About how little time they had been married. About not understanding why this happened. The words sounded appropriate. But something in the tone still felt off. Too arranged. Too aware of the role. As if he was trying to perform grief instead of sinking under it. Then detectives learned more about the practical shape of the household. Keith was unemployed after an injury. He was living in a settlement. Brandi was also unemployed. Not because she had chosen some quiet domestic life. Because Keith would not allow her to work anymore. That mattered. Control rarely appears in one form only. It spreads. Money. Movement. Sex. Speech. Isolation. By now, the image of their marriage was changing fast. The peaceful relationship Keith described was giving way to something tighter and uglier. Then came the cameras. The house had them. That much was clear. And once detectives focused on the surveillance system, Keith's behavior sharpened the suspicion. He said the system was new. He said he did not really know the passwords and some cameras were offline. He said the bedroom did not have a working camera. He had an answer for everything. Too many answers. And on body camera footage from the front porch, he could be seen working his phone feverishly. Focused. Urgent. Not blank with shock. Busy. That raised a brutal possibility. While first responders were working the scene and Brandi lay dead inside the house, Keith was trying to erase what the cameras had captured. If that was true, the case had moved far beyond accident. Now it was about concealment, about deletion, about someone trying to outrun a machine that had already seen too much. But search warrants take time. Data takes time. Remote storage takes time. And time is the one thing investigators hate giving a possible killer. Because while detectives waited, Keith was still free. He walked. He talked. He leaned on his parents. He insisted he was being treated unfairly. He said he was offended that anyone could pin this on him. He said he had no reason to lie. He said if he had done something, he would admit it. But nothing in the case was moving toward resolution through words. This case was heading somewhere colder, somewhere digital, somewhere recorded. Because behind the walls of that house was a history that no one outside had fully seen. And once the video finally arrived, the murder on April 7th would stop looking like a sudden disaster. It would start looking like the end of something that had already been building for days. For more than 2 weeks, the case sat in that brutal space investigators know too well. A dead woman. A deeply suspicious husband. A scene that did not make sense. And the one piece of evidence that could break the whole thing open is still out of reach. 20 days passed. 21. Every day that delay mattered. Because while detectives were waiting for the surveillance footage to be secured and returned, Keith Johansen was not behind bars. He was free. Walking around, talking, breathing normal air while Brandi was on the ground. Pressure built fast. Inside the sheriff's office. Inside the family. Inside the public silence that forms around a case before the truth becomes visible. Then the videos came in, and what they revealed was worse than anyone expected. The cameras did not just capture a house. They captured a relationship. Not the relationship Keith had described in interviews. Not a happy marriage. Not the harmless arguments. Not a rough patch between two adults trying to work through problems. What the cameras showed was domination. Hours of it. Humiliation. Verbal abuse. Sexual abuse. Threats. Control so constant it had become the atmosphere inside the home. The footage pulled the walls down. Brandi was no longer just a woman found dead in a bedroom. Now she was a woman living inside a private pattern of fear. And Keith was no longer just the husband with an implausible story. Now he was the man the cameras had been watching all along. He insulted her, belittled her, tore at her self-worth. He raged about her sexual behavior online. That fixation sat at the center of the footage like a lit wire. He could not let it go, could not absorb it, could not stop punishing her for it. Again and again, the recordings showed him circling the same grievance with escalating cruelty. The issue was not simply jealousy. It was possession. The idea that Brandi had acted outside the emotional cage he wanted around her. That she had crossed a line he believed he owned. And the way he reacted to that belief was terrifying. At times he talked about hurting her. At times he threatened to kill her. At times he told her to kill herself. At times, he used language so degrading and violent, it turned the home into something like a chamber of control. The footage made one thing painfully clear. The murder on April 7th did not come out of nowhere. It came at the end of sustained abuse. Brandi appeared on those recordings not as a manipulative equal in some mutual war, but as a woman being worn down, crying, begging, trying to calm him, trying to fix something he did not want fixed, trying to survive the mood in the room. That is one of the ugliest truths in domestic violence. The victim often spends her final days trying to restore peace inside a storm she did not create. And the more she tries, the more the abuser feels entitled to escalate. The cameras had also captured something else. Days before the shooting, there had been a bedroom camera. That camera recorded what happened in the room where Brandi would later die. But on April 7th, the day of the shooting, that camera was gone from its original position. Removed. Moved. Taken out of the line of sight that mattered most. That detail hit hard, because it did not feel random. It felt purposeful. A blind spot created in advance. A space cleared of witnesses. The rest of the house still had coverage. Other cameras were still useful. Motion-activated footage from the dining room showed movement in the home and did not show anyone else coming in. The front door remained locked. No unknown intruder drifted in and out. No outside shooter entered the scene and disappeared. That matters in murder cases. Once you strip away the impossible, the ugly answer standing in the room becomes harder to ignore. Then the footage from the morning of April 7th was reviewed. And this was the moment the case truly changed. Because the 911 call could now be compared to the camera record. Keith was heard on the phone speaking like a frantic husband. "Stay with me, baby. Please. Help. Hurry." But on the video, that performance did not match what he was actually doing. Instead of trying desperately to save Brandi, he was moving through the house hiding narcotics. That contrast is the kind that shatters credibility beyond repair. A man says he is kneeling beside his dying wife. The cameras show him concealing drugs. A man says he cannot help because he is wet and sliding. The cameras show focused movement, practical thinking, and problem solving. Not rescue and not panic. Cleanup. Concealment. Damage control. That was devastating. Because people can lie in an interview room. They can reshape memory. They can harden into denial. But when their body moves one way, while their voice claims another, the gap becomes almost impossible to close. For investigators, the thumb drive holding that footage was the turning point. The case that had been held in suspicion now had direction. The accident story was done. The question was no longer whether Keith's account was false. It was how to prove the killing was intentional. And the videos helped there too. Because they gave the case what most domestic murders lack, a living record of the days before the death. Not vague references. Not secondhand impressions. A direct visual history. The threats. The cruelty. The control. The sexual obsession. The emotional collapse he was forcing Brandi to live inside. Those final days inside the home became the prosecution's map of premeditation. Not a sudden explosion without warning. Not a man caught in one brief irrational moment. A build-up. A campaign. A rage with direction. Once detectives saw the footage, they moved. Keith Johansen was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Just like that, the man who had stood on his porch asking if Brandi could be saved was in handcuffs. The man who claimed the accident was now charged with intentionally killing his wife. He was taken to jail. But even then, the story did not settle. Because arrest does not stop a manipulator from trying to rewrite events. It just changes the room where he does it. And from the jail phones, Keith started talking again. He talked to his parents. He talked about the charges. He reacted to the possibility of spending decades in prison. And in those calls, the shifting began. At one point, he floated the possibility that Ryland, the 6-year-old child in the house, could somehow be responsible. It is one of the most revealing moments in the case, because it shows just how far he was willing to go to protect himself. A dead wife was not enough. Now the shadow had to move toward a child. Even that was not the end of the movement. In another moment, he drifted towards something almost absurd. If I did it, maybe I just don't remember. That line matters because it reveals collapse. Not moral collapse. Strategic collapse. The original story was failing. The scene did not support it. The cameras destroyed it. The calls now show a man searching for any version that might leave him a path out. Accident. Maybe not an accident. Maybe someone else. Maybe the child. Maybe no memory. All of it pointed in one direction, away from the truth, towards survival. And that is what made the coming trial so dangerous for him. Because once a jury saw the videos and heard those changing stories side by side, the issue would no longer be whether his account had flaws. The issue would be whether he had told the truth about anything at all. By the time the case reached trial, Keith Johansen had already spent years trapped by the evidence he failed to erase. The surveillance footage was there. The body camera footage was there. The 911 call was there. The child interview was there. The jail calls were there. And over all of it sat the same central fact. Brandi Celenza had been shot twice and left dying inside her own home, while the man who claimed to love her built lie after lie around her body. Before trial, there were chances to avoid the full public collision. Plea offers were on the table. Lengthy prison time. A path short of a life sentence. Keith turned them down. That decision says a lot. Sometimes a defendant rejects a deal because he truly believes he is innocent. Sometimes he rejects it because he still believes he can outtalk the damage. In this case, the second possibility hung over everything. Because for years, Keith had tried to master the narrative. He had done it on 911. He had done it with detectives. He had done it with family. He had done it in jail. At trial, he tried one more time. And this time, the story changed again. The accident claim that defined the first hours of the case no longer carried him. The idea that Brandi might have shot herself could not survive the video record, the physical scene, and his own contradictions. So the story evolved. Now he said he shot Brandi in self-defense. That is a major shift. Not a detail added at the edges. A total rewrite. Under this new version, Brandi was the threat. She was the one with the gun. She was irrational. She was out of her mind. He had armed himself to protect himself. He had fired while trying to disarm her. It was the last major transformation of the case. From a tragic accident to justified killing. But even that new version carried the same old structure. Brandi had to become the danger. Keith had to become the forced responder. He still needed the audience to believe that what happened in that bedroom had happened to him, not because of him. The defense also pushed hard on Brandi's methamphetamine use. The argument was clear. If she had been using it heavily, then maybe she would have become unstable, paranoid, aggressive. Maybe she was hallucinating. Maybe she posed an immediate threat. It was an attempt to turn the dead woman into the source of the chaos. That strategy is familiar in homicide cases. When the defendant cannot escape the act, he tries to poison the victim's image. But by then, the evidence had a shape of its own. The surveillance footage from the days before the killing showed Keith's anger, not Brandi's violence. his threats, his degradation, his obsession, his need to dominate the emotional climate of the house. The jury could see the imbalance. They could hear it. They could watch it in real time. And then Keith took the stand. That is always a risk. Sometimes it humanizes a defendant. Sometimes it gives the jury a coherent alternative. Sometimes it destroys what little ground remains. In this case, it deepened the damage. Because once he started answering questions under oath, the lies from the earliest hours came roaring back. He had told 911 he was sliding on the floor and could not get to Brandi properly. That was false. He had told detectives he had no working bedroom camera. That was false. He had spoken as if he had just come out of a real shower. That did not match what responders saw. He had denied key tension in the relationship. The videos contradicted that. He had denied the scream. Ryland had heard it. Bit by bit, the trial stripped him of room. He was no longer just a husband explaining a terrible misunderstanding. Now he was a man caught adjusting to the evidence. And that is a position juries notice fast. Because even without forensic expertise, most people understand one thing instinctively. Truth usually arrives early. Lies have to keep evolving. Cross-examination exposed that evolution. He admitted he had lied. Not once. Repeatedly. He admitted he had misled investigators in the hours after Brandi was shot. Then he asked the jury to believe that, after all of that, now he was finally telling the truth. That is a difficult sale under any circumstances. In a first-degree murder case, with surveillance footage of abuse behind it, it becomes almost impossible. The prosecution did not have to invent drama. The drama was already there. A husband who said the marriage was good. A husband whose home cameras recorded days of cruelty. A husband who said it was an accident. A husband who later said self-defense. A husband who could not explain why he performed grief one way while moving through the house another way. A husband who tried to control even the memory of what happened. And then there was Brandi herself. Not alive to speak. Not able to answer the accusations thrown at her in court. But still present through the footage. Still visible in the way she tried to navigate his moods. Still visible in the way she broke down under his treatment. Still visible in that final peaceful morning when she was just being a mother in her own home, not yet knowing how little time she had left. Her family had to sit through all of it. The videos, the voice, the humiliation, the reduction of her final days into evidence. There is a brutal intimacy to domestic murder trials. The public does not just hear that the victim suffered. They are often forced to watch how she suffers. And in this case, the images of Keith belittling Brandi gave the jury a window into a private terror few abusers ever expect strangers to see. The trial did not move quickly in feeling, even if it moved clearly in logic. Hours of testimony. Hours of replayed lies. Hours of trying to pull apart the final shape of that morning. And then the case went to the jury. This is the moment no prosecutor controls. No detective controls. No family member controls. After all the investigation, all the waiting, all the anger, all the fear, everything is handed to 12 strangers. They disappear. The room empties. The clock changes shape. And every silence starts sounding like danger. The jury was out for hours. Long enough to make people wonder. Long enough to create that familiar courtroom dread. Did they see it? Did they understand the pattern? Then they came back. Count 1. First-degree murder. Guilty. Just like that, the years of manipulation stopped mattering. The staging. The denial. The shifting stories. The attack on Brandi's image. the attack on the child's credibility, the effort to turn the final act into something explainable. None of it worked. In Florida, first-degree murder carried a mandatory sentence. Life in prison. Day for day. No parole. The man who thought he could walk his way out of a staged bedroom now faced the rest of his life behind bars. For Brandi's family, the verdict did not undo anything. It did not return her. It did not erase Ryland's scream-filled memory of that morning. It did not erase the footage. It did not erase the fact that her final days had been spent in emotional captivity before her final moments ended in gunfire. But it did something important. It ended Keith's control over the story. And in cases like this, that matters. Because for years, he had tried to define what happened inside that house. At trial, the evidence finally did it for him. After the guilty verdict, the case entered the final phase that all murder cases eventually reach. Not the question of who did it. That had been answered. The question of what the case now meant. For the court, the answer was straightforward. Keith Johansen would spend the rest of his life in prison. For the justice system, the case had reached its formal conclusion. But real cases do not end that neatly. They keep moving through appeals, through family memory, through the life of the child left behind, through the hard lessons everyone wishes had come earlier. Keith tried to keep the fight alive. He challenged the conviction. The conviction was held. He tried again later, pushing the idea that the case should have been framed around a right to defend himself. That failed too. Each time, the same walls closed back around him. The murder conviction stood. The life sentence stood. And the evidence that had destroyed his first story remained just as destructive to every version that followed. As the years passed, the case remained one of those rare domestic homicides where the private life before the murder was not just described after the fact. It was visible. That is what makes Brandi Celenza's case so disturbing. Thank you for watching this episode of Silent Evidence, True Crime Exposed. If you found this story compelling, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Join us next time as we explore another chilling true crime case. Stay safe and take care.